We're thrilled to be joined by one of the world's most successful investors and entrepreneurs, Reid Hoffman. You're the co-founder of LinkedIn, partner at Greylock, on the founding board member of PayPal, and on the board of Microsoft, in addition to the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Startup of You. Reid, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be talking to you again.
Awesome. So I would love to start up with this book, and that's the reason why you're here in New York today. You first wrote The Startup of You over a decade ago. Tell us about that aha moment where you went from your personal evolution as a multi-stage entrepreneur, then to a seed angel investor, then to a venture capitalist, and now to an author. What made you decide to write the book?
So my high school, which is not too far from here, the Putney School in Vermont, generates educators, artists, other sorts of folks. They asked me to give the commencement speech. And I was like, well, I'm a very odd person. I think I know in the entire history of a Putney alumni, the other two that are in the tech industry at all. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. But what could I possibly say from my experience to these people in very different walks of life? And what I realized is the world has changed. Not that we should all be entrepreneurs, some of us should be entrepreneurs, but we should all be entrepreneurial. And that skills of being entrepreneurial are important, by the way, more important now even than before because of pandemic and change in industries and all these things, but we should bring the skill set of an entrepreneur to your own life, even if what you're doing is just getting jobs and working in interesting companies and doing the thing that's great for you. And so I gave that speech. I circulated it to some friends, and they said, you need to write a book. And I was like, writing a book? Sounds kind of retro. Right? Like, okay, I guess I'll do that. Had known my co-author, Ben Kesnoka, from other contexts, talked to him about it, and we did it. And it's all the advice that the kind of an entrepreneur would give, not for starting companies, although you can use it for that, but for kind of being smart about this modern world and how you navigate the progress of your career.
And looking back to the original release of the book, I was going back and watching some of the content from there, and what I found fascinating was this video that you guys made, of this 8-minute video talking about, thinking about yourself like you're running a business as an entrepreneur. And what are some of the key takeaways that you think really people should be focused on when they're thinking about their career?
So, typical career advice tends to be discover your passion. What motivates you? And by the way, that's important. Of course you should, because if I hate that, then you're probably not going to be good at it. You're certainly going to be miserable, right? So passion's important. But when you think about it from a business perspective, an entrepreneurship perspective, it's like, well, what are your products and services? What are your skills? What are you offering? Well, what does the market want? Well, maybe you say, well, look, I'm really, really good at writing, but actually speaking on video I'm pretty good at, and that's actually, in fact, there's much more demand for that, right? And so there's what the market looks like. There's the competition, right? So what are my competitive edges? What is the thing that I have that fewer other people have? And that also helps you with your kind of market price. And then how do you think about investing in yourself? Like you say, okay, as opposed to just kind of stumbling through life, thinking about it as because a business will invest in a nicer storefront, some better chairs, maybe a flyers or something, or something else. Well, how do you do that in a way to make yourself better, to have progress? And that's, of course, the 50,000-foot level. But then you go down into the details of having a network is really useful. Figuring out how to take risks smartly is useful. Figuring out how to kind of make decisions around how you engage in social media, or all of these modern tools, which is, of course, part of the reason why we updated the book. Because when we did that one, there wasn't so much on social media, right? Or gig work, or any of this other stuff. And so, okay, let's make sure all of those are covered, because those are part of the modern experience.
The modern economy and what work looks like today. And we were speaking before the interview started, and I think, I'm still of the generation that, our parents taught us that you need to stay in the same place for a long time, if not, the majority of your career. It was a prideful moment if somebody stayed at the same company for 10, 15, 20 years. I stayed at my previous employer over a decade, but that's not the norm now, and that's actually not the best route to be successful. And part of that video that I watched was like, is it the company's responsibility to promote you? Is it your institution's, educational institution's responsibility to educate you enough for the rest of your career? No, it's ours. And so I think, people feel like they're a bit confused, especially post-pandemic. We've seen this huge surge in entrepreneurship that we haven't seen in 40 years, according to the census. And at the same time, people are, it's the resignation economy. People are shifting jobs faster than ever. So for this new post-pandemic environment, what are some key guidance or advice that you've noticed that can help people succeed?
So I think part of what you need to do is say, okay, how do you convert challenges into opportunities? So like, okay, pandemic, economic asteroid, hit a lot of industries, hit a lot of careers, hit a lot of people's geophysical locations. That means there's a shakeup, but also is, by the way, part of the reason why thinking about it like an entrepreneur does. Because an entrepreneur says, oh, the market's changing, there's a new technology, the internet's coming, there's something I can do. Well, it's the same thing for you and your career and your jobs as a way of doing that. So the first thing you want to do is kind of say, okay, well, given these changes, as opposed to go, it's changed, like, oh, what's now possible? Then you use your network, right? You call smart people, maybe go out to lunch with someone that you know and go out to lunch and say, hey, what's going on? Which industries are growing and thriving, recovering? Which ones are a good fit? You may not even you shouldn't necessarily just be doing that because I'm looking for a job this week, next week, obviously super important if that's what you're doing. But that general kind of awareness and connection, because like, for example, if you're a journalist, you might say, oh, actually, in fact, in addition to doing like podcasts, maybe I should do a YouTube thing. Maybe I should do a TikTok thing. Maybe I should be one of the earliest journalists doing TikTok. And it's like, okay, that's an experiment, right? Like try things. Like, well, maybe maybe there's something interesting, or maybe someone's doing it well and I can talk to them and can see what's happening. And that's bringing the entrepreneurial mindset to the current time. Now, one of the things we did in the updated edition, because obviously we talked about LinkedIn, but we also, we didn't talk about social media as much. And so like having followers and like why everyone might think about like actually, in fact, if I'm going and sharing content and I'm going and kind of saying some things about what I am, what I'm doing, what I'm seeing, it doesn't have to all be work and professional, but that kind of thing. You build followers who are, Twitter, Instagram, other things, who are like, oh, are paying attention to what you're doing, and that could be actually also helpful in your network. And then of course we have the gig economy and we have the creator economy, and those are all, when they're relevant to you, are things that the possibility to do as part of how you're navigating.
And so this all naturally feeds into the future of work, something that is emerged as a huge, huge topic, as companies are still trying to figure out return to the office, a hybrid work model, a full back to the office. There's some industries like Wall Street want everyone back in the office and have been back for over a year. Others, like media companies, ours included, are more flexible. What do you foresee as what the future of work will really look and feel like over the next couple of years?
So people tend to prognosticate, unfortunately, in two ways. They tend to go, oh, it's going to roll back to what it is exactly 2019, maybe with little changes. Or they go, and now it's all distributed and it's all going to change. And the actual truth of the matter is it's going to not be what it was, but also, and there's going to be key things that are persistent learning. But what's going to happen now is there's the same impulse to get back to the office, to work together. There's going to be, like, I don't think headquarters will be abandoned and so forth. But now, well, we have a whole set of tools to actually make distributed work a lot better. So you could easily see, I know meetings Wednesdays where people might be working from home. You might see places where they say, well, actually we'll have a smaller office and we'll have a lot more hoteling and people will be moving between them. And maybe that person who generally does a lot of great work and moved out of state comes in a week a month and does that. And that now works as a pattern because it gives companies a broader range of talent, gives people a broader range of options, but it will be very idiosyncratic. The reason why there isn't one simple thing is because while the tool set has definitely expanded, and all of the internet native productivity tools, whether they're Coda or Figma or all these other things, will now be enhanced and used a lot. There's still that human impulse of in the Hamilton line, being in the
Right.
room where it happens.
Right.
And so that will persist.
One of the things you talk about in the book, and you've spoken about before, is flexible persistence. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yep. So one of the things that's interesting about entrepreneurship is it's kind of a yin and yang. It's a combination of two things. And so in entrepreneurial advice, you go have a vision and grit and go there no matter what and pound your head through the wall and stay persistent and challenge and work your way through adversity. On the other hand, well, learn, figure out if it's product market fit, change, adapt, get intelligence and so, not that plan, this one. Persistence and flexibility. And the answer is you have to put both of them together. Because you have to be making these judgments about, well, actually, in fact, if I'm pounding my head on this wall, I will get through it. Right? It isn't a 20-foot thick brick wall. It's a 1-foot thick brick wall, and I can get through. And on the other hand, like learning from, well, actually, that is too thick of a wall, or the competition just doesn't work, or that's not interesting. My theory about what I was doing wouldn't work. And so you should always be listening and learning, being in permanent beta, as you know, for doing this. And you bring those two things together. And that's, of course, the same thing for careers, because the question is, you might say, well, I actually think this industry is going to be huge. And you say, well, there'll be more pictures and more images than ever, and the world will continue to enhance that in media. But what you might have started at Kodak, and actually, in fact, oh no, I should be heading towards Instagram.
Another thing that you talk a lot about is the power of your network. But what sometimes is a blanket statement, everybody says that you need a really strong network and that will get you where you need to go. But that's a little bit of a myth in and of itself, right?
Yes.
There's 3 different layers. There's the people that know you really well, and then there's various circles of influence and acquaintances, and it's important to kind of marry those. Can you talk a little bit about your strategy for how to use the network most efficiently?
Yep. And thank you for having read the book. Right. Yes. So there's kind of your allies, your strong ties. Those are people who would, put some blood or sweat into helping you. Those are people who there's a very close tie of loyalty. It could be from your close friends. It could be that your close colleagues. It could be family members. It could be, any number of things. And those people will do very key things for you. They'll sit down with you. They might tell you like, your LinkedIn profile needs some improvement.
Mine does.
Yes, right. Et cetera, et cetera. Then there's your friendlies. Those are people that, look, you like each other. You may have met at a conference, may have had breakfast or coffee sometime. Certainly remember, you're kind of like, oh yeah, we talked about this or something. That gives a much broader range, which sociologists call weaker ties, but because that'll have a broader radar. Most likely, your allies, your close ties, if they had a piece of advice, they would have already given it to you. And when you're kind of looking up and kind of going, whoa, how's the world changing? What's going on? Your friendlies are a very good way of doing that, and that's one of the reasons why to occasionally have lunch, stay in touch, that kind of thing is an important thing to do every so often. And then your followers, right? The people that you may be people don't realize how many ways you can use LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram to actually even having a small following can be able to, because if it's a following and something that you're doing, like you say, well, actually, in fact, my expertise is thinking about how, kind of like it could even be like, social media, but it could be like my expertise is taking pictures, like my hobby is taking pictures of birds. Well, you may have a broad of people who go, ooh, I love birds too, and that's something I do, and that can be a connection through your followership that can also even give you a broader range and new networks. And so it's really important to have the skills, it's really important to do the work, it's really important to have achievement, but it's important to amplify that with these layers of network.
Layering in that perspective can prove invaluable and get you to where you want to go.
Yeah, 100%. And part of it is you can be intentional about your network. Love Adam Grant's work, by the way. You can be intentional about your network while still being human. Think of it as a dance you're doing together. It's not, oh, you're part of my network, I have your business card, et cetera. It's like, no, we are allies. We are doing this together. And so it can be very human, and you can still be conscious about it, saying, oh yeah, it'd be really good if we grab coffee every so often, but just be human about it.
What do you think is some of the hardest advice to take in the book, hardest advice to implement, or something that people might misunderstand?
Probably is taking risk intelligently. Most people are pretty freaked out about risk. Most people want stability in what they're doing. And by the way, part of our thing is adaptability is the new stability, like learning and so forth. It can be a little challenging, but you can do it actually. It isn't, you have to be, jump 20 feet. It's just try new things a little bit and be willing to fail a little bit initially as you're doing that and kind of do that. And that's part of taking risk intelligently. Because when you take risks, you'll learn something. When you take risks, you might get a breakout opportunity. When you take risk, you may discover something amazing about yourself. And so figure out how to take small risks intelligently. Life is a team sport, not a solo sport. Have your team help you, your allies, your friendlies. Evaluate the risk, navigate it, make it lesser, recover from it easily. But that's probably the thing that most people would find most challenging.
So I want to shift gears a little bit. You are also the host of an award-winning podcast, Masters of Scale, and you are personal friends and have had incredible guests on the show, ranging from Elon Musk to Brian Chesky to Melody Hobson to Jack Dorsey to you name it. What are some of the lessons or observations that maybe you've found from some of those individuals and other entrepreneurs that either you've mentored or it could also be advice that you've given that could translate to a broader audience, things that people could kind of implement?
So one of the delights of being the interviewer, the host of Masters of Scale, is not just that I get to interview my friends, that's cool, but also I get to learn from them. I get to sit down and kind of ask questions and learn myself. And then when I'm thinking about which of these learnings are best to pass along, that's the thing that becomes a show. And also, by the way, we only release the episodes once I've got, we got it. This is something I've learned from, this is something I'm doing. So literally all of the episodes are things that I've learned from. I'd say, kind of personal, kind of some great things is I interviewed Franklin Leonard from The Blacklist, and part of it was realizing that systems thinking isn't just a technology thing, which I do a lot of systems thinking, network thinking within technology, but he also does it within content generation in Hollywood and how that all works. And so the kind of lesson is to say, you can actually apply these kinds of lessons between industries and between things, because you wouldn't necessarily think, the person who goes into Hollywood for scripts and kind of being an agent, like what he did is say, I gotta read all these scripts. Well, maybe we just email a bunch of people from an account and say, tell me the best scripts that you saw that you're never gonna make. And then that all iterates into The Blacklist. Like that's yeah, exactly. Or very early, Miriam Nafisi, and this is part of like taking risk and doing things in her life. She was creating this business, Eve.com, and the parent had bought Eve for their daughter, and she was trying to negotiate the purchase for it, and the parent was like, well, you have to negotiate with my daughter. So she ended up negotiating with a 5-year-old for the domain for her business, which of course is just a delightful story. But the thing that she realized, she gave the kid a lot of money, but that wasn't what closed the deal. What closed the deal was the trip to Disneyland.
Oh, wow.
Right.
That's a good one.
Right. So things like that, and that's the being experimental, trying new things that you haven't before, because it was like, as opposed to, no, I'm going to send the lawyers, it's like, no, I'm going to go do it myself. And that's among the things that makes Miriam such an amazing entrepreneur.
So the word no is something that you hear a lot as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you've heard it many times in your career, and it's something that people also face whenever they're trying to push the envelope within a company or corporation. What are some lessons that you can get from hearing the word no?
Yep. And by the way, you're proving that you're very well read, because I'm certain you've also picked that up from our Masters of Scale book.
Yes.
And part of the thing that people normally go, and when you're trying to help people figure out how to navigate and learn things, it's take things that are somewhat counterintuitive. Because most of us, when you hear no, it's like, oh, it's depressing. Like, oh no, I have to walk away, etc. Actually, in fact, how do you learn from no's? How do you have no's be the thing that amplifies you? And it isn't the kind of classic sales, don't take no for an answer, Because by the way, that's sometimes pretty irritating. Depending, when people.
I'm sure you have had some pretty annoying
Yes.
entrepreneurs be like, I don't take no for an answer.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and that's not good, right? It's people interacting. And so, but what you do is you say, okay, what can I learn from it, right? So like, for example, if you're pitching a business and someone says no, it's like, okay, please tell me why, right? Because I might learn something. I might learn something on how to pitch. I might learn something on how to refine the idea. I might learn something from network intelligence. Like very early in LinkedIn, what everyone was telling me is it's a network product. The first person no value, second person no value, third person no value. You have to get like to hundreds of thousands of people before it's valuable. Oh, that's useful I should steer into that. I should figure out how to solve that in order to build that because that's network intelligence, what you're getting. So when you get no's, think about how can I learn from it? How can I adjust? Don't treat it as a soul-crushing moment or I shrink moment. Treat it as a learning moment, as a way to accelerate how you're going forward.
Mm-hmm. So you've been investing since when? The late 90s, the mid 90s?
I would say probably late 90s because, in some sense I put a little bit of money into PayPal, and that was probably my first investment. Very lucky. Very
lucky. Well, no, very smart. I mean, I actually wrote a book proposal based on the untold story of PayPal, so I actually know a lot about that. And you did a lot of key fundamental work there. So how do you figure out which ideas are worth investing in?
So there's different patterns of investing. One of the things is you should certainly, if you are doing investing, have a theory about why you have a massive competitive differentiation and have expertise. It's a little bit like, think of the poker game. If you look around the table and you can't spot the sucker, then you are the sucker. So similarly, you got to say, okay, why am I a differentially good investor? Investing is one of those things people can do it, but you need to have that. So for me, and there's, by the way, investors who do other kinds of things, other industries, other things that are expert at that, and I always, like Warren Buffett, amazing, different kind of investing than what I do. So what I do is I look at a very early stage technology, a founder where she or he or they might be, have a kind of a good plan, be unique in the market, have a unique kind of like an idea for what they can do. And there may be some real risks, like Airbnb, when I invest in that. It's like all kinds of things that could go wrong with that. But you look at all that and you say, if it goes right, it'll be huge. Mm-hmm. Okay, what's the chance it'll go right? What's the theory of the case? What are the risks? How do you navigate them? Can these people do it? Can I help them do it? And that's the kind of investment, that's my core investing.
Mm-hmm. What's one big investment regret that you have? A big opportunity like Airbnb that you said no to? Maybe it's Uber.
It's a long list.
Yeah, well, tell us a few, and why that if it makes it big, it'll be huge wasn't enough to seal the deal.
Well, if I have that whole framework, then sometimes maybe a risk would cause it to be not the thing. One of the ones that feels most personally painful, because I really like Ben Silverman and Paul Sciarra, mm-hmm. They came before the venture round with Pinterest, mm-hmm. and they sat down and said, look, we got this interesting traction, this is a really interesting thing. And I just didn't think it could be big enough because I didn't understand pin boards as a new media type. Mm-hmm. And I just, oops, right? And so that was kind of the misestimation of, that's not that, I didn't see how it could be big, right? And that's one of the things. Actually, there was a funny thing where, someone I knew had told me, I met Airbnb a year later than I otherwise would have, mm-hmm. because I was having this conversation, you should hear about this thing, Airbnb, it's great, it's couch surfing. And I was like, couch surfing is a terrible idea, right? I mean, because it's all the weaknesses of the weirdness of you're in the shared space and all the rest, with none of the glory, the amazing thing, like renting an apartment or renting a penthouse or a house or all these castle, all these other things. And by the way, still some people, the transaction's renting a couch, but you have to go the whole gamut of the experience and what are the experiences of being local to the community. And so I was like, that's not interesting. And so even though Bryan had emailed me earlier, I was like, I'm too busy. And it took a year to come back to. And then literally in the first 2 minutes where Bryan and Joe and Nate were pitching Airbnb to me, I was like, okay, I'm going to make you an offer to invest. put the pitch aside, let's make this a working session. What are you working on? What are the challenges? What do you think the next problem is? Why is that? Let's do that. Because I don't need to see the rest of the pitch. I already know that I'm going to make you an offer.
And were they prepared to share that with you on the fly, or yeah?
Yeah, well, because they're all three of them. They're great entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit into what's in the news right now, there's been a lot of attention being paid to one of your buddies from the PayPal days, Elon Musk, purchasing Twitter. What are your thoughts on that acquisition?
So Elon's obviously one of maybe the most storied and amazing entrepreneur of our time. Let's revolutionize the space industry. Let's revolutionize the car industry. Oh, this AI thing's important. Let's do this Neuralink thing. All of these amazing things. And so I think that and I think Twitter has been slow on its innovation. So I think that bringing a great innovator into this new zone is going to be a very interesting thing. I also think that his stated idea through Twitter that of doing more human identity validation is, I think, a very good thing. One obviously has to be careful about where this plays out to activists in oppressive countries, or even people who are oppressed minorities within well-formed democracies, and you have to make sure that you're attentive to that. But I think human identity validation is, generally speaking, a very good thing, and a good thing that we do a lot of at LinkedIn, right? I mean, in terms of trying to make sure everyone is there as I'm Reid Hoffman. This is really my profile and who I am. And so I think that's all a very good thing. And look, I think it's, Elon always thinks big, and so jumping into what is otherwise a horrifically difficult problem, right? Cultural conflict in society, freedom of speech issues. How do you balance a freedom of speech with we'd like to have a society that is a little kinder, right? A little bit more, building bridges versus burning them. And how do you sort all that out? Very difficult journey. Elon has a lot of guts.
So I remember you had said that I think you were his second call on SpaceX, right? Yes. So are there any calls that you can share for other investments or deals that he's maybe made to you?
Well, Elon and I are friends and we know each other well, so I do get calls. I think one of the reasons is because I don't talk about them very much.
Right, makes sense. Well, I have to ask.
Yes.
And then in terms of the work that you're doing at Greylock and the venture capital industry overall, where are you seeing the greatest amount of opportunity right now? I know you recently started your first company since LinkedIn. It's an AI company. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
A little. We're still mostly in stealth mode, but so I've been doing a bunch of stuff in artificial intelligence. I'm on the board of OpenAI, board of Microsoft. We at Greylock have invested in companies like Adept. And so, AI is going to be one of those very big transformational, probably of all industries, really amazing. And so Mustafa Suleyman, co-founder of DeepMind, and I were talking about his coming and helping us at Greylock with AI, and he agreed to do that. And then he then came to me and said, look, I also have this really interesting idea around not doing the kind of thing that we were doing at DeepMind so much, which is how do we build this kind of completely new artificial intelligence that kind of is doing its own thing, but also how do we help human beings discover their own superpowers, navigate the world and so forth, in a set of ways of taking these language models and these foundational models and doing that. And there's obviously a specific idea, unfortunately, not yet ready to share, but let's do that. And I said, okay, look, I'll fund it and so forth. And he said, well, actually, in fact, would you co-found it with me? And I said, I think it's important enough, since the first time since LinkedIn that I would do that.
So I can come to you with my important idea and you might co-found it with me.
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to call out an advertisement for that, right? But if it's possibly going to really improve the world massively at scale, then I'd certainly like to get the call.
All right, well, I'll put my thinking cap on then. Well, Reid, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Always a pleasure and an honor.
This all started because Aaron Paul and I, 3 years post Breaking Bad's finish, we happened to be in the same city at the same time, which was rare. And we missed each other. So I said, well, I think it's too early to work together. Yeah, it's too early. Maybe we can do, a play or something. Maybe. And then Aaron Paul says, let's create our own mezcal brand. And I said, wow, that is a terrible idea. I don't know anything about spirits business. And by the way, my experience with mezcal was not great, because when I was in high school and college, we used to play poker. And we used to buy a big case of beer and a spirit of something or other. And I remember someone bringing mezcal, and it tasted like carpet cleaner. It was awful. And so when he said, hey, how about mezcal? I immediately went back to my high school, college, and I went, oh. And he said, no, you had a terrible experience. Come with me. So we went to a mezcal bar in New York City. We sat down at the bar and sipped so many different varieties of mezcal that I was completely won over. And so I said, okay, all right, let's go down to Oaxaca. Let's be authentic with this. Let's find something that we both really love. Neither one of us wanted to just put our name on something and say, hey, good luck, hope it works out. We wanted to do something that we can be passionate about and justify the time it takes to invest in them. Mezcal is a beautiful spirit, old spirit. You can do shortcuts in making it, but it's very labor intensive. To prove the old world process, at our palenques, which is the name for the processing plant, there's no electricity. There's no electricity needed to produce this. It was important for Aaron and I to do this right. Our maestro, our mezcalero, Gregorio Velasco, he's been making mezcal since he was 8 years old. We wanted to go with the highest quality. We don't have to do this. We do this because we fell in love with the spirit. We fell in love with the culture and the families and the communities down in Oaxaca, Mexico that make our brand and others around the region. They're beautiful people, hardworking people. So we asked, what is it that the town needs? And collectively they said, well, we could use a new water system. Okay. So Dos Hombres paid for and installed a brand new high-tech water system for this entire community. So not just for making our brand, but also for these people who need clean drinking water. You know, you take for granted the ease of life that we have in America. You really do. And it feels good to be able to say, we're here to help, but they work hard and we want to work hard for them. The espadín takes about 6 years to mature as a plant. The tobola is around 25 years. And it is also a much smaller plant. So the yield from it, it's difficult. You have to find it in the wild. We have a policy there where with every plant is harvested, we replant 2 plants so that we know that our company and other companies can harvest the tobola in the future. On Breaking Bad, I was definitely the senior partner and Aaron Paul was the junior partner. And on Dos Hombres, it's flipped. He really was the spirit behind the spirit. He was the one who had the initial idea, and he spearheaded our social media program, and he's done an incredible amount of work. The chemistry, and that's a pun, that we had on Breaking Bad was very strong. We concur on almost everything. We just happen to, and I think that's why we're close friends, is because we align on so many things. Just the way we want to live, the way we want to work, our sense of competition. And so it just seems to blend just like our spirit itself, it blends well. Aaron and I, from the get, we said, look, I don't want a job. I don't need a job, neither of us. So the only way I would want to get involved in anything is if I can fall in love with something. And we just fell in love with this. So we love the work, but it's not a job. We're like dry sponges. We're so eager. We're learning every step of the way. And it's a fascinating experience.
I'm here with Rajan Mehta, who is the Chief Product and Technology Officer at WWE. Rajan, first, congratulations on being in the 2022 CIO Next list.
Diane, thank you. Thank you for having me today, and I really appreciate the recognition from Forbes.
Well, one of the things that got you on the list of many things was what WWE did during the pandemic. So talk a little bit about that in terms of the audiences, live audiences, which is so important to the brand, obviously dried up. What was the solution?
Yeah, so if you go back to March of 2020, which is, seems like such a long time ago, but it was a little over 2 years, and the pandemic started to really kick in. And one of the things we've asked for WWE is our live shows. We do 3 live shows every week that are broadcast or streamed all over the world, and it really resonates with our fans. And if you look at that period of time, we had to move our live production to a fanless environment, which we did for a number of months.
Fanless environment, that sounds so sad.
Yeah, and it really was, right? Because our superstars, they play off the fans, right? When they have a promo, they get the reaction from the fans. When they have a move in a ring, you really get that reaction, and the fans are part of what we do. They're part of the story. And we felt that was missing. So in August of 2020, we launched the Thunderdome. The Thunderdome was a unique experience where we learned a lot. What we did is we took over a venue in Orlando, and we created stadium-like seating. So there's thousands of LED screens set up around the ring, and people were able to stream in live and watch their programming, which was then also on television or streamed globally. So it was an amazing experience. We had over 1 million people sign up to be part of this Thunderdome experience, and it really just revolutionized what we did during the pandemic.
So it's interesting because that merging of sort of the offline, online, what did you learn from that? Because I know you're now in the NFT space, you're doing a lot in Web3. How did you take that and sort of adapt it to now thinking about the next wave of entertainment?
Absolutely. So there was a lot of things that came out of that we learned. So first, just even on the production side, one of the things that we weren't able to do in the past was our drone cameras, where drones were in certain areas, but since we didn't have fans in the venue, we were able to put drones anywhere in the venue. So we learned a lot from a production perspective of different angles and different things that we could do. Part of our ring entrances as well have things like pyro, which we were able to put in different parts of the venue, and then we learned a lot.
Nobody's going to get hurt.
Exactly, and then we learned a lot about augmented reality, and so that's all transcended into what we do today. So what we do for augmented reality, and I'll take an example. One of our superstars is a gentleman named Randy Orton. The Viper, when he comes into the ring, there's a big Viper that comes out from augmented reality that people on television are able to see, right? So there's a lot of new things that we were able to innovate on, and we learned all those through the Thunderdome. And then going back to your question of how does that transgress into things like NFTs and the next generation, and we're really in the early days of the NFT market, metaverse, Web3, all of those pieces are starting to come together. One of the things that we did find that, our audience, we know is global, but they had a really big passion about WWE. So they were able to stream. I mean, we basically had people coming in for the Thunderdome on every single country on the planet.
Is it as good an experience as live, do you think? What's the feedback?
So, I think for live is just, there's something special about live. And, whether it's WWE, whether it's a Broadway play, whether it's a concert, when you have passionate fans about something live, nothing can replace that experience. Having said that, now, I'll use an example that we did during the pandemic in India, where we have a huge fan base. There was Republic Day, which was in January of 2021, still in the midst of the pandemic, and what we were able to do for the audience in India was create a Thunderdome experience specifically for our Indian fans. So they were able to stream in and watch the Thunderdome and watch the programming made for that audience. So there's a lot of unique ways to leverage technology in a virtual perspective as well.
What are the challenges with NFTs? Because on a base level, it seems simple, but yet it doesn't seem to be something everybody's been able to master. What have you learned about that? Any advice?
Sure. My first advice is this is really early days of NFTs. You have different leagues, different entertainment properties who are getting into this space. Everyone's going to learn, including WWE. We experimented a bit last year. We started off in WrestleMania in 2021 with The Undertaker. We did an NFT drop, and we combined both the physical memorabilia with the digital memorabilia, and we saw that to work really well. Then we did another experiment with John Cena, which was in the summer of 2021, and we did a similar combination. So those learnings helped us put together our NFT program, which is called WWE Moonsault. For those who aren't aware, the Moonsault is a specific WWE pro wrestling sports entertainment maneuver. So we had a nice play on that, which we'll be launching later this year.
Now, I'm intrigued by the fact you have Chief Product and Technology Officer together. Those are sometimes separate. How is that integral to what WWE does? Because there's so much that's productized. It's, when you think about the technology layer, has that always been something that's, you think, a key factor in its success?
Sure. A lot of the principles on the product and technology side are very similar, right? It may be a different end user from using the technology, but you have to make sure the user experience is great. You have to make sure the technology works. And a lot of the underpinnings, leveraging things like cloud technology and different infrastructure, are very similar. So when we looked at technology across WWE, we saw these similarities and the ability to scale that way. And so that's really why we put all that together.
One of the things I've always been struck by the brand, having covered it, is it is a first mover. I know, from pay-per-view to NFTs. Now, help us see around the corner as to what's next. What's on your radar and intrigues you?
Sure. One of the things we say about WWE, and I like to say, is that we're slightly ahead of the curve. Right? You don't want to be too far ahead where no one understands what this is, but you're far enough ahead where you are an early mover in this piece. And like you said, with pay-per-view in the 80s, or even streaming back when we launched WWE Network in 2014. I think we're right there right now in this Web3 concept of NFTs being a component of, but the metaverse is a component of. And when you're in this early days of it, there's a lot of things that we just don't even know how it's going to play out. Not specific to WWE, but just in the industry as a whole. And I think that's really where we are with Web3.
Great. Rajan Mehta, thank you very much. And again, congratulations.
Great, thank you.
Cuyana is a lifestyle brand that encourages women to live with the philosophy of fewer, better things. And to us, that means really loving the products that you buy, living a life full of joy, really having a curation and an intention with how you do things, right? So we feel that with that, you can really live life to the fullest. We are designing for a customer who is living a multifaceted life. To us, it's really important that we're not defining the box for her, that we really are creating the products that help her play all the roles in her life, right? So when she's transitioning from work or home, whatever she does, the products are designed to work for her. We're never trying to say that this is who you need to be in order to shop our brand.
It all started as a need, and as a customer, I moved to the US when I was 18 to get my college education here, and I was just very surprised at the amount of product that was out there and how noisy the shopping centers were, just how much availability there was, how many sales there were. And the curious thing about all of that was that it was just really hard to find great product. And I came from a country where there was much less options, but perhaps because of that, we were taught to be very thoughtful about our purchases. And there was a lot of education that came before making a purchase. A purchase was thought of as an investment. And that is something that I didn't see when I arrived to the US. For us, sustainability matters from the moment we start making a product, even how we design it, all the way to how we sell it and how we actually encourage the customer to buy what she loves so that she can wear it over and over again. And then we give her tools to give those products to other potential customers who will give it a second, third, fourth life. And that way we think of that product's journey in a fully circular way. We really focus on sourcing materials that are earth-friendly, that are produced in a way that does not impact the planet negatively, or that are actually recycled from materials that have already existed. We produce in a very smart way, in a way that maximizes the yield of those materials where there's very minimal waste. Building a retail brand is very hard, but building a retail brand that lasts through the years and through time is even harder. And there are very few brands that make it through the hard times. And I would say that because we came at this problem, right, from a place that was different, right, with our backgrounds, and the way that we solved around it, it just allowed us to build a business that has been incredibly agile and adaptable. And we've been able to get through COVID and through just very hard times in a way that allows us to just be stronger at the end.
That love and that connection finds its way into every aspect of our lives, right? We weren't here to build the same type of company that we saw everywhere. If we were going to dedicate our lives, if we were going to dedicate our entire family's journey, right, across continents, across generations, it had to mean something. And so we bring that mindset every day. So not only do we care about the beauty, the function, the customer, growing a sustainable company, right, which to us is a company that sustains, that has good business DNA, but it was also about making it a company that had integrity, had respect, that the world is better with Cuyana in it. And we believe that every single day.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jabari Young, and this is Inside the Deal, taking you inside athlete portfolios and having some great conversations with sports business executives about the latest trends in the business. And coming up, we have the F1 CEO, Stefano Domenicali. As the U.S. Grand Prix is about to start in Austin, we recap what he learned from Miami, revenue around Formula One, and more, taking you inside the deal with the Formula One CEO. 2 years, right, as CEO? If you had to think of one word to describe what that journey has been like, you taking over as CEO of F1, what word would you pick?
I would say extraordinary experience, exceptional, and just amazing. Because I remember when I started the first day, as a new role. I mean, and I have to be grateful to Chase Carey and Craig Maffei, who basically chose me. I was, as you know, CEO of Lamborghini. Yep. After my life with Ferrari before, I was already in a different, in a different zone. Yeah. And when I received that call, I was wow, that's amazing. There is a train that is passing by once, so I need to get it in and then try to give the maximum that I can do in order to show the respect and the trust that I've been received by receiving this call. So thanks to Greg and Chase, I would say that the journey started, quite an interesting or challenging situation, COVID. Yeah. So I came in my office in London, and the only thing that I could do is to meet my people like we are doing now. Mm-hmm. I mean, just through the video, and meeting all the relevant partners, relevant promoters, just by sitting here all day long, having a lot of water to drink, yeah, and make sure that I was connected with them. It's not easy. Yeah. But step by step, I think we did the right thing, and we kept the pressure on the system, kept the pressure right one, yeah, into our organization, that from a very difficult situation, the pandemic, we took that as a great opportunity to showcase how we were able to react to that in a very strong position, because we could have been in a catastrophe. You can imagine not performing the championship, difficult year from the financial perspective, but we were able to create the credibility, move on, and create really what we are living today as an incredible experience, an incredible momentum for Formula One.
Well, as you said, extraordinary, right? I mean, listen, when you came on, it was celebrated your hire, right? And you just mentioned you come from a great background, Ferrari, Volkswagen, right? Lamborghini to now F1 CEO. I became a fan during the pandemic. I mean, I really dug in thanks to Drive to Survive on Netflix, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But, the growth, the progress of F1 over the years, when you left the sport and now coming back, you surprised at where it's positioned right now?
Well, actually, it's true. Where you are in this business and you see the positive result, you don't have to be surprised, but you have to be happy. When I'm saying happy, because, I know what does it mean in terms of dedication from your people, from our people, dedication also, and trust from all the teams that are working with us, and all the the companies that are trusting Formula One. And when you embrace this journey versus the future with such a growth, you need to be really thankful for the ones who believe in your project, in our project.
Yes.
And therefore, it's just sensational to see how all the things we are doing all around the world, despite the difficult situation we are living, is giving us incredible benefits, incredible results.
2022 season about to wrap up. You got Mexico left, Brazil, Abu Dhabi, but before that, it's Austin, U.S. Grand Prix coming back to the States. First time since Miami, right? What's the future of that race down in Austin? Because it's 4 years left on the deal after this year. And I look at the other cities, those are 10-year agreements, and only in Austin is 4. So what's the future of that race? What do you like about Austin? What needs to maybe happen to keep that there long term?
Well, first of all, I have to say one thing, Jabari. I mean, Bobby Epson and the promoter there is doing an amazing job, incredible job. We don't have to forget that a couple of years ago, we were coming from a situation where actually the numbers were not really there. We were in a very difficult situation. Generally speaking, we were really thinking, do we really to keep investing in the US? Because after many, many years, we were not able to activate the fire, understand what I mean, the spike. And actually, in the last 2 years, we are living exactly the other way around. There is an incredible excitement in the US, and Austin was the first to believe in Formula One in a consistent way. So we need to respect that. And we're going to be in front of 440,000 people this weekend. Huge, immense number, to whom we need to create an incredible show. We need to give an incredible experience at all level for the people that are joining us and following the great racing. So the future of Austin really is great, and I don't see any problem thinking that they can be for a future longer than what we have with us, because they did an incredible investment. The beauty of today is that because of the success we are living, all the promoters are pushed to perform better. They need to be respectful of what we want to do together. They need to understand what is the value proposition they need to offer to our customers that are, at the end of the day, the fans that are coming to the track, that the experience to be top. And not only on that, everyone has to take on board the sustainability goals that we need to share with them. When we are going to events that needs a lot of energy to perform, because we have so many people around, we took the carbon neutrality in 2013 very seriously with our partners, with our promoters, and everyone has to invest also in that respect. That's why we are pushing in a constructive way the boundaries to everyone to be respectful on this agenda. But as I said, we are looking forward to be there next week because it's going to be an exciting weekend.
Absolutely. And listen, that track, though, as you said, you're going to need investment from the promoters as well, because I was in Miami, right? And I talked about that in a minute. Great track. Vegas, I'm sure it's going to be phenomenal because that's going to be at nighttime on the Strip. I can only imagine what that's going to look like. And if I'm having a look at where each track stands, I would say, okay, Austin's third. Do they have to make an investment? Because the people I talk to down there says, hey, it's going to need at least $100 million investment to really improve and get up to standards. Is that accurate?
Well, I think that is the accuracy of the numbers depends really what you have to do. Yeah. I mean, every single track has to do something different depending on what is the level of investment. For sure, investing in experience is what we want. In experience means attention to the crowd, attention to the things that are working, but improving the details to make sure that this event will be incredible. And this is what we want to do together. But as I said, Austin, just a great respect, because what they were able to deliver in terms of what they did in the last couple of years is just really impressive.
Yeah. Well, you've been there over the years, right? Both as an F1 official as well as on the other teams. What do you like about that track? What do you like about Austin? Because I look at that territory, right, and you would almost think it's almost like having two races near Mexico because it's right there, right? So you get that Mexico crowd coming up, and they like the races. So what do you like about that market in Austin where you can see it being there long term, other than the fact that they were loyal at the first one to bring F1 back to the States?
And never forget that.
Yeah.
There is a principle that is very important. But on top of that, I would say it's a different crowd. Austin, as you know very well, in US, is a city that is booming up for many reasons. The typology of customer and fans there is different from the one we're going to have in Las Vegas, and are different from the one we're going to have in Miami. So also in terms of cluster and positioning, I think that is totally different. So it's all complementary into the equation. You know, the city lives and breadth of Formula One. This is what we want also the other cities are doing, like Miami did it, for example, like I'm sure Vegas will do it. Yeah. So as I said, every single experience has to be with its own personality. Austin has to be Austin experience. We're going to be in Vegas, we're going to be in Miami, there has to be a difference. So that's the peculiarity of being with us and representing, in this case, your country in a different perspective.
Absolutely. Now listen, you mentioned Miami. I was there, Stefano, right? It was a great event, crowded, but I tell you something, man, it was hot. Okay, it was hot. I was sitting at turn 1 and I was having a slushie, and by the time I looked up after the cars, my slushie turned to tea. What did you learn down there that you're going to be that's going to be better next year in Miami? Because again, I love the experience, but I ended up watching the rest of the race inside of the stadium. It ruined my experience. Are we going to see better as far as control, heat? What do we expect in 2023 in Miami?
First of all, as you said, Jabari, it has been an amazing experience. Yep. A lot of action. I mean, as you remember, we've seen so many VIP, you know, from the world of music, the world of movie, the world of action. That we say that's the place to be. Yeah. So that's what that will be our statement. Everywhere we go, that has to be the place to be. With regard to Miami, you know, Tom Garfield and his people did an amazing job, huge job. Don't forget they were starting from zero. Yeah. And if you talk with all the runners community, you know, what we brought to Miami was something more than what Super Bowl brought a couple of years before in terms of business around. This is magnificent, huge. As always, when there is the first time as an experience, you need to develop the things that you believe that could be improved. And we are working together to make sure that the people that will come and have seen something not really the way that they wanted will be delighted to see that we have done a step forward in the experience. So we are fully on track on what we want to do. I will be in Miami after Austin to have a meeting with Tom and see, you know, the progress of the things. But be sure Miami next year, in terms of hot, that's maybe the beauty, you know, to instead of having too cold, but for sure it will be a great experience.
Just tell Tom to put a little bit more of shade where people are sitting at. Otherwise, I'm going to have to upgrade and sit up there where all the rich people are at. They sit up there with the nice tents and the air conditioning. I got to sit up there with them, but I wanted to sit with the fans, and it was hot, but still an amazing experience. I enjoyed myself, and as you said, it was great. The nationalities, seeing people coming from all over, that's one of the things I really enjoy about F1. So, you know, again, wrapping up 2022 season coming on, I'm looking at revenue, right? 2021, you bounced back. It was about $2.1 billion. 2020, it was about 1.1. $744 million in Q2, right? Because F1's it's a tracking stock, so it's public. What are you anticipating in 2022? Are we going to exceed $2.1 billion? Are we going to the 3? Where are we at?
As you can imagine, Jabari, I cannot anticipate anything because we're a public company. Yep. I cannot disclose anything. But I think it's looking good. I mean, it's looking that we are back on track after 2 difficult years because of the pandemic. But, you know, the projection of the total revenue for the future is really looking good. Yeah. We need to be prudent, as always in life, because, you know, you see how many things are happening around the world. You know, just think, you know, and the effect on us, you know, it just, the prudency is the right way to tackle that. But for sure, the fact that we have a lot of interest from the commercial point of view, it's giving us a great signal for a bright future, also from that perspective.
How are the rule changes? What's the feedback you've gotten from the teams? You know, you have a cost cap in place now. You have, you know, more technical rule changes. You know, you said that it was going to improve the races, get, you know, drivers to be close to each other, to improve the competitive field. What's the feedback you've gotten in your 2 years as CEO?
We got positive feedback. If you see the way that the drivers can stay close to each other, fighting one against the other with this new regulation, I think that the job is done. I think that with regard to the cost cap, we have a lot of interest related to the fact there's a new way of tackling the future on that. It's the first year of application, so as expected, there will be a lot of discussion, but that's part of the game. It's something that is crucial for the credibility of our sport, and I'm sure that the FIA will have to enforce in the right way that they have. So I would say the job that was done by the new regulation is done.
Yeah. When I say this phrase, Netflix Drive to Survive, what's the first word that comes to mind?
Great job. Great stuff. That was, I would say, a very discontinuous approach in our very, very conservative world. And I would say that has been phenomenal, the way that Netflix, activated new generation, and above all, let's say, fans that were super fans of Formula One. So we need to thank them. They did a great job together with us. We shared a vision at the beginning that not every one of our teams were really sure about the success. Now is the other way around. So we keep working like crazy to make sure that the content is really what it should be in order to attract even more the people that are watching it.
India, Africa, though Africa especially one is those races that you said you want to get that back on the map. And also there's rumors of India. Where are those two continents? Where do they stand?
I mean, it stands on the fact that it's true that we are missing one continent, that is Africa. And we would like to see if we can find the right opportunity to be there. So we are working flat out to create it. And with regard to India, like in other regions of the Far East, the interest is very, very strong. Therefore, we need to find the right balance in terms of, Jabbar, we have 24 races, it's already a big number.
Yeah.
So we can add some more, but it will be a big problem. It will be not even right. So we need to find the balance. I guarantee to you that the interest is there also in India, as it is in other countries of the Far East region. So all good, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we take the right decision for the strategic development of our business.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Brandon. So nice to see you here in Botswana.
Yes, great.
So we've been talking a lot about capitalizing on opportunities here. And Brandon, you are capitalizing on one of the biggest opportunities, which is the very broken global supply chain. And you're doing that with your autonomous trucking company, Embark, which IPO'd last year at a $5 billion valuation, making you, at 26, the youngest CTO of a publicly traded company.
Thank you.
But I think, and there's a lot of things that are really interesting about what you've done, but I think perhaps the most interesting is that you IPO'd with a pre-market product. How? Why? Can you please explain?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing to say is that building self-driving technology is really hard. And it takes a lot of time to build the product. As for the question of why we went public pre-product, I guess the simple answer there is capitalizing the business was really important at that specific juncture. And I think there was a lot of SPAC mania, as many of you may be aware, in the public markets at around that time. And I think strategically for the business, one thing that was really important is just making sure that we've got the runway and the funding to be able to accomplish the really incredible goal that we're shooting for, which is to build and deploy self-driving trucks.
Yeah, that is a very incredible goal. So speaking of self-driving trucks, when I think about self-driving trucks, I kind of think about like an 18-wheeler barreling down the highway with just like a wheel turning, no one behind it. What does Embark actually do? Am I very far off?
You're pretty close. So just to speak about the product for a second here, we're building fully autonomous vehicles to run on highways for the sole purpose of moving freight between major cities. I think the really interesting strategy that Embark has took was developed in the early days, that the intuition that self-driving is a really hard problem, and to deploy a new and emerging technology, you really got to focus in on, how can you simplify that problem as much as possible. And so for us, we didn't set out initially to solve the entire problem of building self-driving vehicles that can do, take you from point A to point B, from your home to the airport, or last mile delivery. We figured to bring a product really to market, you've got to make it as easy as possible to build. So for us, what that actually means is that we're not doing the first and last mile of this trip. What we have is humans going from, say, a distribution center, loading up the truck with refrigerators, but that first part of the trip will be done by humans. It'll be taken to a transfer point. At that transfer point is where we hook up the fully automated vehicle, and then we'll send it thousands of miles down the highway to another transfer point, and we unload it. And the intuition for why we do it this way is that driving in cities is really damn hard.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many of you have driven in the city streets, but they're pretty chaotic. You've got jaywalkers and all that stuff. But on highways, the problem's a lot simpler. And so we wanted to take our product and focus on this very specific niche, but at the same time, it provided a lot of real business value. And so by being laser focused on that, we thought that would be the most successful strategy.
That's incredible. So who exactly are your clients?
Yeah, so we actually sell our technology to, to take a little bit of a step back, just to talk about the players in the freight industry. You have shippers, those are the people who want to ship freight. You have the fleets, are the people who actually employ truck drivers. They own trucks, they move freight from point A to point B. And then you have like the truck manufacturers who build the trucks. So at Embark, we're a technology provider. What we do is we put our technology on the trucks. So we partner with the OEMs, they're called, the people who build the trucks. And then we sell, combined with that OEM, we sell our technology to the fleet. And they are the ones who operate the trucks. And then we work directly with the fleet on how they actually mobilize that operation.
Okay, so you're a software company.
We are a software company. Yeah.
So how did you, now being 26 years old, officer of a publicly traded company, how did you get your start? Can you take us back to the beginning and how exactly you ended up where you are today?
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things about mine and my co-founder Alex's story is that it was very organic. We had met at the University of Waterloo. And we actually, our friendship was born through the love of robotics. We studied mechatronics engineering in Canada. And over the course of a summer, myself, him, and a few other friends, we just wanted to build a self-driving golf cart. We had saw what...
just for fun.
Just for fun, yeah.
That was a cool thing to do, okay.
Yes. And so we saw what Google was doing. We saw that they had a really ambitious project, and we thought we could do it. We had a little bit of a background in engineering and competitive robotics, and we thought we could take this golf cart and make it drive itself. And over the course of 6 to 8 weeks, we took that from a regular golf cart to a system that could, you'd drive it in a circle, and then it would repeat that thing. And if you jumped in front of it, it would stop. It was a little terrifying at first, but no, it was really cool. And by no means was that a ready-to-go system, but it really taught us in the early days just how to build technology and just take the first step. And then from there, we got into an accelerator program. We immigrated to the United States to be in the central hub of the technology industry at that time, and then eventually stumbled upon the trucking idea and sort of took things from there.
So stumbling upon the trucking idea and stumbling into the United States, you are an immigrant entrepreneur. What's that like? I know a lot of people in this room probably are based not where they're born, so talk about that.
Yeah, I think for myself and my co-founder Alex, in a lot of ways it was really empowering, and in a lot of ways it was a struggle. So on the empowering side, I think what was really cool is when we went to Silicon Valley, there's a really strong Canadian entrepreneurship community there, and just that network had accelerated us through that trajectory. So just having connections, people who have been there before to show you the ropes, that was really cool. And because we shared something in common, that was really important to bring us along and lift us up. What sucked was the U.S. immigration system, flat out.
Yeah.
It took many, many years to just get in a stable place from a visa perspective. Not being, we had dropped out of college to pursue this journey, and so not being an educated person in the United States, despite pursuing one of the most complicated technologies, in the eyes of the U.S. immigration system, I was an uneducated white male trying to get into the U.S. So that took a lot of legal engineering, we call it, to secure my residency there.
Well, I hope that someone in the U.S. immigration office is looking at you and shedding a little tear. And how many people in this room are interested in, at some point, taking their company public? Okay, say, a pretty sizable amount of humans. Brandon, what advice would you give for someone who's looking to go on that big journey?
Be prepared for it, I think, is the simple answer. What's difficult about going public is that there's just so many details about what you have to do when there's so many new laws, so many new regulations. It's really tough to get your bearing on, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. And the severity of making mistakes is now another level, right? You have the responsibility of telling your story to the public markets, but doing that in an authentic and a truthful way. And if you make mistakes, it's very damaging. So you need the proper support, proper set of advisors, proper legal team to actually make that happen. And it's hard to do that on an accelerated timeline. Very hard.
And how big is your company now?
We're over 300 employees.
Okay, so how exactly do you balance, starting with the technical stuff that you love to do, wiring that golf cart to run itself, versus having to manage that many people?
Yeah, I think the kind of split that Alex and I have is that Alex tries to protect me from all of the noise of the public markets, raising capital, running the business, to isolate me to focus on building the product. So fortunately for me, I don't have to answer that question.
Nice. How often do you check the stock?
Once a month is my rule.
Okay, that works out.
First of every month.
That works out. And what about, obviously, where you have an incredibly global audience in front of you, have you thought about bringing Embark outside of the US?
Yeah, for us, our journey in the United States, or for our journey, it starts in the United States. The US is a great market for autonomous trucking, specifically because it's very, very wide, and a lot of freight is actually done on trucks. And so that's going to be the first market that we go after, and then likely we'll do a little bit of a North American expansion and then look towards a global expansion after that.
And what about Botswana?
Botswana specifically. Yeah, well, we'll see how this week goes, but I think I've loved my time here so far.
Have you thought about making Embark just for cars?
No, I think one thing that's really cool about trucking, kind of on the theme I touched on before, is really just like simplifying the problem. So taxi services and cars interacting with humans in city streets, it's very complicated. So I think for us, tackling the $800 billion industry, which is trucking in the United States, and then the multi-trillion-dollar industry worldwide, I think I'd be pretty happy if we succeeded at that.
Yeah, how far are we from having Embark all over the place and driving next to self-driving trucks?
Yeah, so in 2023, we look to do our very first demonstrations of our driverless technology. So this will look like us actually deploying our trucks in a limited context with nobody at the wheel. And then in 2024, we're starting to commercialize the technology.
So what will that look like?
That's first going to look like, in the most primitive form on day one, we're going to pick 2 locations. This will actually be in Texas. In the United States, we just announced our expansion out there. 2 hubs, we're going to work with a commercial partner, and then ferry freight between these 2 hubs. And then we're going to incrementally, after that, bring on new lanes. So increase the volume on that lane, new customers, and then also do an expansion across the Sun Belt in the United States, which is the drier area. And then after that, we go north, and the reason for that is there's snow in the north, and that's a lot harder to deal with.
Yeah, snow is very difficult to deal with. Luckily, we're not dealing with that here in Botswana.
Yeah.
And okay, so switching gears here a little, let's talk about age. You're 26. You, as we talked about before, are the youngest CTO of a publicly traded company. How do you feel like that has affected you? Do you think that being young is an advantage or a disadvantage?
I think it's, throughout the journey, it's had its trade-offs. I think the first thing to realize is that in robotics and self-driving technology, it's a very new industry. And so really nobody's experienced, including myself. But I think specifically in the automotive industry and in that sector, one thing that's been a struggle is, it's a very classically driven industry. Not a lot of technology companies do very well there. And so you sort of need to look and play the part in that way. And so it's been difficult, especially in the early days when you've got a golf cart and you can drive it in circles, and you go to this trucking OEM and you say, we're going to make self-driving trucks, and they're like, no, you're not. You don't even know how to build hardware, right? And so through that journey, it's been, it's been a process of just legitimizing ourselves at every single stage. And the only way we've been able to actually accomplish that is just through building good technology, showing good progress, and despite the fact that there might be other people with more pedigree, what we've built speaks for itself, and that's been really important.
So are you saying that you basically need to invent your own industry to be young and successful?
No, I think it comes with its own advantages and disadvantages, but I think just sticking true to like yourself and what you know you can do, and if you lead with that, I think that's the way to do it.
Mm-hmm. And we also, at Forbes, we spend so much time talking about CEOs. We don't often talk about CTOs. How do you, but everyone who's a founder is dealing with some sort of technical application. How do you balance the CTO and the leadership side of what you do?
Yeah, I think it's a very important part of the role. Like a lot of what I have to do day to day is inspire people to work for me, for the company, and in a lot of ways I think I work for them. I think it's a really fun role because I'm a nerd at the end of the day, so getting really deep into actually building the technology and the strategy there is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can imagine that this is pretty much a dream come true for you. What is your favorite part of your job?
I think, to be totally honest, it's all around just the people. I think the coolest thing about the founder journey is that you build this incredible people that are inspired to work on a singular mission. And you go through a lot of highs and lows together, and there's a lot of crucial moments along the way that you just never forget about. I think the accolades of going public and all the success is really cool, but the things that you genuinely take away from the process is just having a clear purpose with a committed group of people. And that's by far and away the best part of the journey.
So speaking of process, we kicked off our day with the president of Botswana. And to do your job, you need a lot of public and private collaboration. Obviously, it's a little bit more US-centric, but talk a little bit about how you manage that relationship.
Yeah, and just to say it straight up, right, we're building a technology that has the ability to harm people, right, and we have to take that very seriously. So very early on in the company's journey, we hired a head of public policy. And what's really cool, really interesting about self-driving trucks is that there isn't regulation really anywhere in the world today to dictate how this technology should be built, validated, or deployed. And so we have, in a lot of ways, responsibility to set out the standards for that. And I think one thing that's been really encouraging, at least about the frameworks in the United States, is that the policymakers are very eager to learn. So yeah, very early on, we hired our head of public policy, and transparency was very important from day one. We told them what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're approaching this problem, which standards we're applying and which ones we're not. And in a lot of ways, it's a partnership with the public to outline our frameworks, and they want to learn as well. They're not roboticists at the end of the day, but they've certainly seen a lot of stuff.
Well, that is some of the more promising things I've heard about the US government, so that's great. Thank you for that, Brandon. I know that we're almost out of time here. So in closing, I would love for you to just share with this room, what is your advice to people who are looking to have the success that you've had?
I think, in a lot of ways, it's just get started, be relentless, and it's not going to be easy. It never really is, and that's what makes the journey incredible and so inspiring. Very much for Embark, as I mentioned, showing up as two 20-year-olds with a self-driving golf cart and saying we're going to take on a big industry. We didn't start with, a ton of momentum behind us, and we just had to build the technology, do it really well, and showcase that. And if you can just do that really well, and at every stage, just do that incrementally better, then at some point it amounts to something really large, and that's kind of the path that we've taken.
So you too can start with something in your driveway and turn into the officer of a publicly traded company. Thank you so much, Brandon, for your time. This was a really fun conversation.
Thanks, Alex.
Mandela, we are speaking just a few months after you took the reins of Allraise. Congratulations.
Thank you, and what a 3 months it's been.
What a 3 months it's been. We've had a rockin' and rollin' economy and market, and we'll get into all of that, but I just want to rewind. What made you want to take this job?
What made me want to take the job? Oh, that's a good question. You know, what made me want to take the job was, number one, the people. I think I'm at a state in my life, in my career, where the people are a priority in terms of how I make decisions and what are their belief systems, their values, where do they put their money in their mouth, and where does it collide? But really being in a group of powerful women who walk their talk is so inspiring to me, and I wanted to be a part of that, so that was a big reason. And then also the track record they have. It's an organization that's been in existence and growing and scaling for 4 years, and I believe that my background as an entrepreneur, an operator, an investor, an LP, I could really come into this community with a level of empathy and compassion and network and allyship that I thought I could take it to the next level, and I think I can.
Let's talk about that background. You've worked with hundreds of founders.
Yeah.
You've really helped scale, and a lot of underrepresented founders. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, and what experience do you want to bring to Allraise?
Yeah, so I myself was one of the first Black women in Silicon Valley to raise venture capital. This was back in 2012, so about a decade ago, believe it or not. And I had a lived experience that was really challenging, isolating, where I had to figure out what the playbook was, what the unwritten rules are, who I should be talking to, what I should say, what I shouldn't say. And when it came time for me to use my privilege and power navigating Silicon Valley years later, I decided I wanted to create a space and a program for other underrepresented founders where they would never have to go through what I did. They would never have to figure this out alone. And so I also am a teacher, and so I'm pretty good at building curriculum. So I worked with the end in mind. If my goal is to help historically underrepresented, underestimated, underfunded, under-resourced, under-mentored, you keep going in that realm, if my vision is to help them get access to capital, get access to mentorship and branding and insider knowledge, how do I do that? Right? So I built out a program, worked backwards, and I went on in my founder gym company to train over 650 entrepreneurs around the world. And many of them were the first in their communities, even in their states, to ever raise millions of dollars.
Now, it's been a rockin' and roll in 3 months, as we alluded at the top of the conversation. I've heard from some people that they're worried that this economic environment means there will be a pullback. A lot of the diversity commitments that companies, founders, investors made 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that'll be the first thing to go if financials get tighter.
Yeah.
Do you share that fear?
Fear. I think it's a possibility. I think it's a possibility because, like you said, it's rooted in fear. When the money dries up, people aren't willing to experiment as much and to use different patterns to make new decisions, right? So when we talk about the pattern of the past and how people currently identify who's the talent, what type of companies do they build? If it worked for them, I'm going to use that same playbook. And what diversity, equity, inclusion means is honoring a different pattern. This person may not have gone to that school. This person may not have worked at that tech company. This person may not have this track record that these other founders do, but I'm willing to take a bold bet on them because their distance traveled and where they started and everything they had to do to even get in the room to pitch me, the investor, that counts for something. So to answer your question, do I share that fear? I think it's a real possibility, but I think it's a bigger opportunity. I think the people in positions of power, those who are the check writers, those who are deciding which companies, which founders get funded, I would really encourage them to check in with themselves and understand this opportunity they have to retreat and go back to what feels safe and proven, or to continue to boldly move forward and make bets, give opportunities to people who have not had that opportunity so that we don't lose all the progress that's been made.
George Steinbrenner was arguably the most impactful owner to come through baseball. He built the Yankees into the financial behemoth they are today, the most valuable team in baseball, valued at $6 billion, according to our estimates. He led them to 7 World Series, countless marquee free agent signings. Steinbrenner never hesitated to bring stars to the Bronx. From Reggie Jackson to Alex Rodriguez, he always pushed to keep the Yankees competitive, and his win-at-all-cost mentality could be detrimental at times, especially how he was perceived in the public eye, but ultimately he put a winner on the field. Many times on Seinfeld, we caught a glimpse of what was supposed to be the back of George Steinbrenner's head. He was parodied on the popular sitcom, and it was an enjoyable exaggeration that reflected how he was this larger-than-life persona. I remember the first time the character appears is when George Costanza is following the opposite of his instincts and interviewing for a job with the Yankees, and he runs into Steinbrenner and ends up insulting him, and the line is something like, "Hire this man!" And I think that's just representative of how kind of temperamental Steinbrenner was and how fiery he was and just how much of a larger-than-life persona he had become. He was passionate, but he was also erratic. You know, you look back at some of the things that happened during his tenure. He hired and refired manager Billy Martin several times. He went through a number of publicists during the early years of his tenure. And also, he had some more complicated issues in his regime. He was kicked out of baseball twice, the first for making illegal campaign contributions, which I should say that he was later pardoned for, but also he later made shady business dealings in the 90s that resulted in another breakaway from the game, well, more so his day-to-day management of the team. When George passed away in 2010, he was survived by his wife and his 4 children, Hal, Hank, Jessica, and Jennifer. His wife later passed away, but coincidentally, he died in a year where there was no estate tax. So if he had passed away months later and the new rate of 55% had kicked in, which it did in January of 2011, his heirs could have been on the hook for something like $600 million. In the time since George's death, the Yankees have grown tremendously in value from $1.6 billion in 2010 to $6 billion today. That's been the primary driver of growth for this family's fortune, and we estimate that each of George's kids got an equal share. Hank, unfortunately, George's eldest son, died in 2020, so it's unclear what happened to his share of the fortune, but we estimate that his 3 surviving kids, Hal, Jessica, and Jennifer, based on their controlling interest in Yankee Global Enterprises, which is the holding company of the Yankees, makes them all billionaires. Under the umbrella of Yankee Global Enterprises, the holding company that controls the Yankees, there are several other businesses the Steinbrenner family has pieces of. One is the Yes Network, which is the network that George actually came together with the Nets and created to broadcast Yankee games regionally. There's also New York City FC, the Major League Soccer club that plays in Yankee Stadium, as well as Legends Hospitality, a joint venture that Steinbrenner came together with Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones to form in 2008. And then more recently, Yankee Global Enterprises took part in Redbird Capital's acquisition of Italian soccer club AC Milan for a reported $1.28 billion. In terms of how the heirs compare to George's oversight of the Yankees, it's definitely a more quiet and tranquil regime. Hal is the guy who runs the team now, and he's not necessarily the outspoken person that his father was, or even that his older brother Hank was. But that doesn't mean they've lost their reputation for spending. In 2017, they traded for Giancarlo Stanton, the star outfielder who had signed a 13-year, $325 million contract with the Marlins. 2 years later, they went out and shelled out another $324 million, signing Garrett Cole to a 9-year deal, the most ever for a major league pitcher. Success has kind of lagged, though, for the franchise. They're in the midst of a World Series drought over the last 13 years. The last time they won was 2009, when George was still alive, and they haven't been back to the Fall Classic since. So you could say that the Yankees haven't achieved what they've wanted to in that time, but also they've been competitive on the field nearly every year. They were back in it, winning 99 games this year. So it depends how you define success, but the Yankee brand demands success, and not reaching the World Series, especially over the last few years, is something that definitely weighs heavily on the franchise.